Good morning, good afternoon, and good day. How are you?
I'm okay.
I'm up and running.
So yeah, it's October now. So
I know. It's like, wow, we have like 3 more months, and this year's pretty much over with. One for the books. It's just like yesterday, it feels like, it was New Year's to me. So you turn around and you're like, hey, wow, this year's almost over with? So,
as you get older, time moves faster
oh,
because
that is true.
the
That
amount
is
of
very
time
true.
that you remember having is greater than the amount of time that's passing. Right? If you're 3 years old, a day seems like forever. It seems like a day seems like 10 years, right?
That is true. Very true. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good day, everybody. This is Secure Nation. We are proud to present Criticality, which is a podcast that we do here that is the cutting edge of cybersecurity practitioners, critical infrastructure, enterprise architecture, as well as experts and nerds that we bring onto the front lines to deal with insights. Today's episode, we are going to be doing a deep dive into some real threats, some new bold innovations that are actually coming out, new strategies, as I tell people that keep going on in the virtual world to keep you nice and safe. I am Luther Chip Harris. I'm a cybersecurity nerd. I'm an author, business owner, and I deal, with IT and OT and all of the wonderful, horrible things that go on the internet. And of course, this is our wonderful Gothic princess that we love so much,
Thank
Miss
you.
Kim, and I'll let her do her introduction.
Yes, I'm Kim Crawley, and I've I've taught enterprise cybersecurity in college recently, and I would say I'm more of a generalist under the realm of enterprise cybersecurity. So I've always been interested in both the defensive and offensive and the administrative areas, all harmonious. So yeah, generalist. I'm a generalist. I'm a cyber generalist.
I deal in generalities and then very specific things. So, as I tell people, in this wonderful IT cybersecurity world, you're always learning. It's always good to keep, on the, cutting edge, sometimes not the bleeding edge, but, you got to keep informed, what's going on in there in the real world. And this, Secure Nation is very great to be able to give us this platform to talk about some of these things in the IT world and the OT world. So, we try to stay out of government and politics the best we possibly can, but it is what it is sometimes. But we have to touch on those issues because one feeds off the other into private business, into government, and so forth. So, one of the new things I actually saw is that CISA actually just put out, I guess their soon to be end of quarter, end of the year, kind of like, hey everybody, guess what's on the uptick? Cybersecurity fraud. And we're seeing that a lot more right now, especially in the retail sector, with identity theft and why, people like, will never ask you from the IRS for you to buy gift cards to pay them. I mean, it's just,
Yeah, we were discussing that earlier, but people still get fooled by that stuff.
yeah.
As I mentioned, cryptocurrency ATMs generally in this area have a warning on them saying the Canada Revenue Agency will not be demanding that you pay them back in Bitcoin.
I've never had to pay my taxes in Bitcoin. So I mean, it's just one of those things. I mean, I never had that proposed. Now, when I did my taxes last year, since I started my own kind of business in here and my own consulting company, my tax agent that does my taxes goes, "How much cryptocurrency do you receive a year?" And I'm like, "I don't receive any." And he's like, "Well, on the new tax forms, they're going to be asking you, how much crypto you actually ingest into your business as, company payment, for tax reasons." And I'm like going, "Huh." I never knew that until last year, until I had to do my taxes, and I guess we'll get asked the same question again this year because um, that was kind of odd,
Yeah.
something that you don't think. But I did see in my area that we actually got our first cryptocurrency ATM, that was out of all places at the mall. I don't,
Ah,
I was like kind of going, wouldn't this kind of be, well, I don't know, some banks do cryptocurrency, not in this area, but I saw, a cryptocurrency ATM machine at a mall, and I was like, huh, well, that's kind of, I guess it's neutral territory, so
Every independent, like not 7-Eleven convenience store in Toronto that's like an independent business seems to have a cryptocurrency ATM.
see, yeah, it's kind of a sticky subject. I mean, you're in Canada. Most people don't know this, but you are in Canada.
Yes.
In Toronto. I'm here in the South.
Mhm.
In the United States, and it cryptocurrency is not a big thing here in the U.S. It's still kind of one of those sketch things. I wouldn't say
I wouldn't
necessarily
say it's
mature, but
bigger in Canada or anything. It might just be they think Toronto urban market. This is where we're going to market our
right,
cryptocurrency.
right, right. It's kind of the same thing. It's one of those. When it comes down to retail theft, the first thing I think is credit card fraud. Credit card crime, stuff like that. But people get their Bitcoin stolen all the time. And stuff. And there's a lot of people that believe in the demonetization of the banking industry, which is had its ups and downs, during 2008 and 2010 and 14, and a lot of people don't trust banks. I get it. So I mean, I thought that was very interesting that CIS is putting out, warnings about the cryptocurrency industry, and then the other one I saw that was very interesting was for companies now, which is this will be the first big year I think that they actually can do it, is in the OT sector, the operational technology, which is trains, planes, automobiles, water, gas, electric, and everything. They can now start issuing fines now, starting in January the 2nd, for, on your audit, you normally have IT, people do their audit their IT, and what their physical, their virtual, their cloud, their whatever they've got, inventory. Now they have to inventory their OT stuff as well, and if it's not compliant, they can bang you up pretty bad, on that audit.
Well, that's
Uh,
good. That's good.
yeah.
Like to neglect OT would be disastrous. So
Oh yeah, because I mean, you think of a building, right? People don't think about the power that comes into the building, the water, the steam, the electricity, all those wonderful things, and it will be very interesting to kind of see, how these audits are going to turn out. Going, oh, we might need to upgrade this because if not, it's going to cost us twice as much paying the fines than it would be
I
if we just make
wonder
the fix.
if Andrew Delarb, I'm going to mispronounce his name, I guarantee it. Andrew Delarber has any thoughts about that? Has any thoughts about operational technology?
Yeah, I mean, because today we're going to do something new called the Gauntlet, which is going to be really fun for somebody to, that's in his position to kind of run down to talk about IT and OT stuff, which most CIOs and CTOs and people at the C level don't like talking about. They're like, shh, don't say anything about the building automation system. You know,
Dol- Dolber, right? That's how.
Yeah, you're
Dollar.
close. It's okay. It gets massacred every time. It's Dalbar. Just imagine it without the apostrophe. Just think like a drop table SQL injection. Remove the apostrophe.
Damn dirty micros. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell me about what it is that you do. What your current role is, who you kind of work with, if you want to tell us, that and everything. And today we're going to talk about what we call the gauntlet, which is when we talk a lot about critical infrastructure, and we also talk about cybersecurity, and some of the things that we actually see that's been happening in the news. Like last week we talked about the SIM card attack, that we saw that was busted by the Secret Service. So we just wanted to kind of give you your platform right now to kind of tell us about what it is that you do and kind of go from there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I appreciate the couple minutes. So again, Andrew Dalbar. Currently, right now, work for Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina
Ooh.
as a cybersecurity architect manager. And I've been in IT, I think about 20 years now. Cybersecurity around somewhere between 13, 15. I can't keep count.
I
So
started in '94, so I get you.
yeah,
You're like, how old are you? That old.
yeah. Put it this way: we got started when the job market was not horrible, right? That's
Yeah.
another topic for another day. But I
Oh
got
no,
my
no, no. We talk about
yeah,
it all the time.
yeah. Hey, yeah, we could probably spend 2 hours discussing that one. Yeah, I got my start. I would say, we were talking about, being generalist and things like that. I got my start back in the day doing security analyst work and then kind of migrating into forensics because that was kind of all my interest, hey, good guys versus bad guys. And I was always interested in, you're looking at the artifacts from an incident and you find little things like maybe the person's real name, maybe you find their real IP address, a lot of little golden nuggets. So that's kind of what got me started. I've done everything from forensics. I haven't done heavy in the pen test space, malware reverse engineering, a lot of security engineering. I've done a lot of SOC and SIM stuff. Talk about that for days. I've slowly worked my way into security architecture, which is kind of uh, all of them put together in one big fat juicy holistic view, and then how we can secure things by design and things like that, secure principles.
So, since you're in architecture, I deal with a lot of architects. I'm really good at security architecture. It's like, hey, this is the reason why you need a firewall. This is the reason
Yep.
why you need these applications and so forth. What are you seeing right now as your biggest challenges?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm sure this is everyone's challenge. It's AI, whether it be generative AI, LLM. I would say our biggest challenge, I'm glad you asked me that. We've been fighting with this for the past couple months, is when from an architecture perspective, you might look at a solution or a technology, go through a security review, security analysis, maybe do threat modeling on it. And you say, hey, look, this is an enterprise approved solution, enterprise security approved solution. Hey, let's go ahead and put it in the environment. And then now that we're living in, the AI new world, it's, hey, look, this solution that you previously approved now has AI capabilities, right? And so
Right.
how do you look at it from not only a cybersecurity perspective, but from an AI governance perspective to say, hey, do we do another deep dive on this application? Do we only look at AI functionality? So for us, that's the biggest challenge in working with our AI governance teams and collaborating with them to say, hey, look, what do you guys look at? What do we need to look at? And then coming together and trying to holistically put it together and make sure that solution didn't introduce something that's going to, present some risk to the organization.
Right. So in other words, how much did it open up, the
Yeah,
surface attack of, things being different? Because
correct.
I deal with it, from a government level, as well as a state and federal level, and as well as private company level. So AI, that bullet train is done left, so like everybody's going to be battling this. I mean, we've talked about this, Kim, I think since what, day one, our first preamble show that we actually did was like how AI is going to change the threat security landscape, in IT, definitely. OT, big, do we really need to put a water treatment plant on the internet?
You
You
really got to watch. I
know,
think you really got to watch out for information of your organization leaking. So, like data loss prevention, like
right.
stuff, and new attack surfaces related to generative AI models. Unfortunately, I've heard about a lot of data leaking through those means. Right? You might want to. Have you been restricting so when employee endpoints, have you had to like retweak the data loss prevention systems on them, or
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah, we spent a nice bit of time, looking at our DLP policies, looking at, things simple as, hey, your web filtering, what are the approved solutions, and I'll call them, sandbox solutions that,
Right.
maybe the devs can work in, and maybe we have to scope that access and say, look, well, you 10 users over there, you can start playing with Chat GPT, but we're gonna scope that access and we're gonna, kind of restrict that access. So yeah, we've had to put a lot of measures in place, but it is like playing whack-a-mole, like I said, because as every technology pops up, and we've had a lot of technologies come in too that might perform something as simple as writing an email for someone, and you go, okay, well, it's not necessarily PII, PHI, but what are you doing with this application, and how do they secure their infrastructure and their LLMs and things like that? So yeah, it's like I said, we could probably talk for the next 24 hours straight on those challenges.
Yeah, it's a big thing to tackle, but it's also one of those good things for people to start the conversation about,
Mm,
and I see that happening a lot, with a lot of, because first off, it's a green paper problem. This costs a lot of money, as I
yes.
tell people, it's not some turnkey out of the box, solution, because when I run a pen testing team and a red team and everything, and they think, oh, we can just, buy this application and it'll do all the things for us. No, it'll give you an idea, but did the computer really get in or did the human really get in? So it
Yeah.
teeter totters back and forth, when you're dealing with penetration testing and, you know, um, a lot of the people that I have been talking about is cyber intelligence, and how we're going to deal with incident security awareness, secure coding, best practices. How are we going to follow our ISO model 2701? In our audits, and then of course risk. Risk is always there. So, all right. So, sir, are you ready to run the gauntlet?
Well, I'm as ready as I'll ever be. So just try to make me look good, okay?
All right, we will be gentle and kind.
There you go.
So here we go. So as and most people don't know this, CISA, which is one of our critical infrastructure governing bodies here in the United States, um, they deal with infrastructure. They deal a lot with different things that run about. So I'm going to let Kim run the gauntlet today, and this is 16 different sectors. Okay, that define by the Department of Homeland Security and all the wonderful people that regulate us here in the United States, the standards for those sectors. So, and I want her to, to basically, she's going to say this. I'm going to give you an example here. So this is going to kind of give you knowledge. So, for example, be a chemical. So, production, storage, transport. What are your, you get a minute and a half, to talk about what you think about those things, right? And then we switch the topic. So it kind of gives people that are listening to this podcast and seeing this podcast an idea of what you see from your side, in your opinion, on those parts of the actual standards that are out there. So, Kim, are you ready?
Okay.
All right.
Just don't keep score, okay?
Okay. And I'll kind of keep the meter going. So, all right, you ready?
All right.
Kim, whenever you're ready. 1, 2, 3, go.
Okay, so what's up first? Let's see here.
All right.
This is a new segment, so I'm going to have to look up. We have a reference here. Okay, critical infrastructure sectors. So we'll start with, can you name the 16 sectors? I have them right in front of me here.
Hey, look, I can pull my notes real quick, but I'm not that smart. But I mean, you're looking at everything from critical manufacturing, chemical, electrical emergency services, the energy sector, financial. So obviously government facilities and, IT backbones, nuclear reactors and all that fun stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Blue Cross is medical insurance, right?
Yes.
So what would be the sector that is most directly relevant to Blue Cross Blue Shield?
That's actually a really good question. I know they have, let's see, do they have a healthcare sector? I don't think they actually do, but
right there,
healthcare and public health. Thank you. Sorry, I had to scroll through my notes. Yeah, obviously that's where we're going to align. Yeah.
Healthcare and public health is one of the sectors.
Yep. You are right. Thank you for calling me out. Yeah. So, I mean, we per se, obviously, we're not strict healthcare, right? We're payers and part of the healthcare industry. But we do contribute, obviously, to affecting how healthcare is provided to our members and to the human population, right? I mean, we're all humans. We all get sick and different things like that. So a break in the chain, maybe between us and with the hospital, or maybe with a PBM, a pharmacy benefits manager, could affect patient care. It could affect patient safety, right? I mean, it could be something simple as a breach of the hospital's PHI or our PHI. I mean, you're looking at this critical information being leaked and could be used, like you said, for cyber fraud and identity theft. And we've seen a big trend towards stealing health data. A lot of hospitals, struggle with the funding and the resources for cybersecurity. I've worked at a couple of hospitals before in the past life in IT, and that's always been a big thing. How do you harden your systems at the same time making sure you can operate and write a paycheck at the end of the day? So that, I think that's the difficulty, and a lot of times working with doctors and things like that is also a challenge.
I think I can see at least 3 or 4 other sectors that would be really relevant, maybe not as immediately relevant as healthcare and public health, but would align with what Blue Cross's scope is.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably fit into a couple of those for sure. I mean, you tell me what you think it fits in, and we'll have a informal talk.
Okay, so we've got the other relevant sectors I can see are information technology, which is very broad.
Yep.
Communications, So network communications are probably in the majority of enterprises anyway, regardless of what industry they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so would medical insurance overlap with financial services at all?
I think you could see some overlap, but I mean, I think fintech is a pretty specific thing. But I mean, obviously, we handle payments, we interact with financial systems. I mean, you got to pay your health insurance. So yeah, that's a big piece, right? So I mean, we have to do our due diligence to protect the information of our members. You know, as it relates to they put their trust in us and
Right.
says, hey, look, you know, if I give you my credit card number, I'm going to trust you. You know, you transmit it securely to, you know, maybe if you have a third party, you know, payment application, or maybe you process it internally, you know, because that's a big thing. No one wants to see their um, their bank account and their credit card with some fraudulent, you know, purchases in the Caribbean or something like that. So
I
yeah, no,
can't
that's a good
buy I
point.
I can't buy a pencil without my wife knowing in QuickBooks. So I mean,
What I
it's just
find really interesting is there's an entire category for dams. That
oh
has
yeah,
nothing to do
Yeah.
with Blue Cross and Blue Shield whatsoever.
oh
I
yeah.
guess unless someone injures themselves on a dam and then they need medical insurance to treat their injury.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the things I see on here is communications, right? Because I
Mhm.
mean, you know, you are an architect, you know, and you're the one designing the whole backbone part of the network and the segmentation and stuff. So, kind of give us, you know, where you see the healthcare industry dealing with communications right now. So, network infrastructure, wired and wireless, you know, data exchanges, cloud-based services, you know, and then being able to build that into, you know, good customer service, you know, because I mean, we are in the service industry, every single one of us, you know, so we
Yes.
care about our users and we want to make them happy because they are paying us. I mean, you know,
Yep.
so we want to give the best customer experience that we got. So, Lotto, would like to hear your views on that, sir.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point, you know, and that's something I tell a lot of people. You know, cybersecurity used to be, we used to be kind of the no people, right? We say, hey, you're doing something dumb, please stop. You're never doing it again. And now I think we've shifted to a, you have to enable the business, right? So how do you design securely and make sure that the business can operate, can make the money, can pay the paychecks and things like that.
Right.
So it's a very valid point. And you're talking, you know, going back to data exchanges, healthcare as a whole. I mean, there's so many data exchanges between SaaS platforms, between providers, and you know, from hospitals. I mean, you name it. There's data going everywhere, and the volume of records and the importance of these records is pretty big. So we do spend a lot of time making sure that, hey, again, is this data exchange secure? And with the transition, you know, a lot of healthcare as a whole in the country is getting a little pricier. It's definitely going up, and a lot of us are taking a hit in the wallet from that stuff. So it's also a focus on how do we give the customer, the client, the member the best bang for the buck from a user experience too, because that's big too, right? You know, so
Right.
whether it be maybe we optimize our payment systems to say, hey, look, this is so much easier for you now. Instead of taking it 15 minutes, you got to mail us a check. Maybe you can do it, you know, on your phone and things like that. So, and how to do it securely, obviously.
One thing that I have seen as like a change in attitude that has been happening that I've heard cybersecurity thought leaders talk about the past several years is we used to have, maybe it's more like the longer someone's in the industry their attitude changes, but it's at the beginning having an attitude of, oh, that stupid user for clicking on that phishing link and then totally messing up our corporate network by clicking on that phishing link. How can they be so stupid? And now, as you get into the industry more and you become older and wiser, your attitude shifts to, the problem is not that the end user was fooled by that phishing email and they clicked on that malicious link and brought down the company's network. The problem is that that employee clicking on that link was capable of bringing down the company's network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't believe in shaming the user into submission. You know, it's like, wow, let's go back to Active Directory and take a look at why this user even had access to that in the first place, right? And then how many more people have access to that?
Yeah.
Don't
We
blame the user, like blame
yeah,
the entities with more power, which is the people administrating and designing the whole system.
Right, like I, had especially during the holidays last year, we had, a malware attack where it's like, oh, click on this and you get a free Pizza Hut pizza or pizza or whatever another from blah 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 blah. And it was a phishing attack, that actually hit us. First off, the question was like, how did Groupon get into our network and our systems? And better yet, how were they able to click on it? How many people did click on it? And then how was the malware released? Because we didn't block, the proper things on the firewall and the DMZ and all those kind of things and yada yada yada. So do you kind of see that happening now? Internally when you're doing like governance in auditing, like, do you go back to like the core foundational standards and then work your way up?
Yeah, and a lot obviously secure design, right? And secure design by principle, sort of, that makes sense. And it's a good point to what Kim was saying. It's not just the user. Maybe it's you don't have your controls layered properly, right? And we've had a lot of push, not only in healthcare, but a lot of different verticals. I would say in the past, maybe like what 5, 6, 7 years, where we'll start to look at things like that. Hey, why do you have administrative access to your workstation? What's the need? Can we scope that access? The users that have access, can we maybe put them? If you deploy some type of UBA solution, do you want to kind of put them on a risk list, right? Hey, any actions they commit, maybe it's riskier. So yeah, it's one of the things that unfortunately I think a lot of times change does not happen until there's been a breach or an incident, right? And there's so many pieces to cybersecurity. You go, what hole in the dam or in the dike do I put my finger in next? And until the hole pops and starts squirting water, you honestly don't know where to start. And I think that's what fuels change, right? A breach usually means in the past you would get a blank check for cybersecurity, but no, it's a good point. If you can start at the foundation and work your way up, again, holistic security.
Right, and you see that a lot in cybersecurity architecture sometimes, where it's like, okay, I got state and federal regulations over here, right? And I got compliance and that needs to be done over here. Then I got cyber and secure, insurance that says I need to do this, right? So it's like, how are you right now constantly juggling those kinds of things?
Yeah, no, again, another good question that we do every single year, right? Obviously, compliance and regulatory bodies, that's going to come first. That's when you look at, even if you, from a project planning perspective, if there's a regulatory change or a mandatory change and there's been a mandate, guess what? It's bubbling to the top of the project list and it becomes the priority, right? Because if you can't satisfy what the government dictates, then you can't, unfortunately, be in the business. So it's definitely something to look at, and as those changes are made, you can kind of see, I think, is what HIPAA 2.0 that just recently released, and there's been a lot of talk around how do you interpret what they dictate, and I think that's the biggest challenge when they give you, hey, here's your controls or here's your requirement, is how do you interpret that and do it properly, right? Because network segmentation is a great example. Sometimes they might say something like, hey, do network segmentation. Well, is that micro segmentation? Are we talking site to site? Are we talking, so there's a lot of ambiguity that you have to interpret and work with your GRC teams, your legal teams, your privacy teams, and come to a best conclusion, say what's going to mitigate the risk and, satisfy the mandates.
That's very true. Especially when legal gets involved. They're very specific on a lot of the things that you need to be able to do for that. So, since you do a lot of architecture stuff, what do you do in the OT world, or do you even stick your finger even in that side of the fence, or in that pot, and stir your finger around?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, in a previous life, like I said, when I did cybersecurity at a hospital, it was a little more OT, right? Because you have to look at everything, and we would call, look at OT in a hospital might be something simple as, a PACS machine, a radiology machine that needs to be segmented from the network. Kind of in where I'm working now, it's very basic OT, right? Looking at HVAC systems.
Right.
Maybe it's some type of backup generator if it's IT control, internet control facing things like that. So obviously with those things, first basic principle, network segmentation, all the fun cyber hygiene practices, if you can change the default passwords, change passwords, and it's controlling and scooping that access down. And again, a lot of times the only thing you have with OT type devices is detective controls, whether it's simple as, hey, I've got my SOC watching this pretty closely, and maybe I've wrote a custom query that's going to say anybody outside of this IP range touches this HVAC controller, or maybe this proxy card, door controller, it's an alert, right? So
Hmm.
the fact they're legacy, I think that's what makes it so difficult to protect properly.
Mm, that's very true because OT is a lot different than IT, and they think they can kind of lump them all together. But
Right.
as I've told people, you've got to separate IT and OT. You need to have a DMZ, demilitarized zone between that's this world and that's that world over there. And it's kind of good that you kind of explained that because like most people think, oh, they need to be coupled together. Like, no, 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 no,
No,
no.
no, yeah, yeah.
No.
Well, and that's a good point. There's a lot of pieces, right? I mean, you can think of HVAC. You can think of a lot of. I mean, obviously now that we're all remote, it's not a big a deal. But like I said, proxy card readers, right? How do you control access, not only physical access to your data center and to your network closets, but control the access to the controllers themselves? How do you segment your NVRs and your physical security cameras? Maybe your man traps. So there's a lot of physical security aspects I think play into the kind of OT conversation of how do we secure these things, right? So, I mean, if someone breach your man trap, maybe you have a controller for, a man trap or maybe proxy card reader, maybe they can just walk right in the building. Maybe they clone, one of your cards out in the parking lot, what a lot of pen testers do. So I think that's another piece that the physical security a lot of people overlook unless it's, essentially a government restricted or controlled environment or very sensitive environment.
Hmm. And do I see that, especially in the public health sector versus government. What's different in Canada, Ken, than what we see in the U.S.? Is it completely different? Because I mean, it's good that we have somebody, first off on stage that sees it from a different perspective in a different country versus us, in the United States. So,
I don't think Canada has better regulations for anything related to cybersecurity, IT or OT. Um,
hmm,
I mean, when I think of American data privacy laws, for instance, I think they're generally better in California because they got the but here in Canada, like if you look at PEPEDA, like PEPEDA is toothless, right? It's the nearest equivalent we have to the GDPR, but it's absolutely nothing. Like the GDPR is specific, it has outlines, it has you got to report a breach in 72 hours, sort of thing, specific
hmm.
fines. The PIPEDA is written like weak sauce. It's written like, for instance, if the enterprise discovers that they have a breach, they should report it in a timely fashion without defining what a timely fashion is. So a company could say a decade was a timely fashion.
Hey, we found something
Yeah.
over there, but we don't know where there is. I
And
got to
I'm
get that.
sure that we make the same stupid mistakes here of connecting factory machines through OT to the public internet so that people operating the factory can remote into the factory sometimes and that sort of thing. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's better here.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good to kind of hear, what we hear up, from up north versus what we do down here in the dirty South. So,
Lots of things are better here, but I wouldn't say cybersecurity regulations or practice are among them.
and since you deal with it in healthcare, sir, what's your feelings on GDPR? Do you think that's eventually going to happen in the U.S., like we've seen in Europe, based on, you know, standards, that they want to be able to push, for privacy and concern and so forth? Because, I mean, I think it would be pretty cool if I walked into my doctor's office and say, hi there, give me all my medical records, and they would be able to, like, ta-da,
Yeah.
put it
No,
on this
no,
jump drive for me,
yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, honestly, I think the big companies are going to fight back about GDPR. I mean, I agree. I mean, if you start looking at some of those regulations, those requirements, I mean, it focuses on the consumer and the human, right? So it's you have control of your data, and you get to tell them, "Hey, I want my data. You can't have my data. You can't sell it." So I definitely applaud them for that stuff. I personally don't see it happening. It feels like cybersecurity regulations here in the United States move extremely slowly. It takes
Yeah.
a lot of hemming and hawing.
Yeah, it's like, tell people in the banking industry, it's very Doric. It's a very Doric model. Doesn't change very much, but when it changes, it's very foundational because it's a ripple effect across the entire industry. It just takes something very big and bad to happen before that's actually done. So, that's very good perspective. That you say, okay, it's not going to happen. And here's why. You
Right.
know, and one thing that I also see, especially in a lot of things that we deal with in the OT world, These things haven't changed since 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. Yeah, there's been a little more regulation here. There's been more demonetization there. So forth. But one of the things I look at, that I see that we're missing the boat on is disaster recovery. That's a big thing. Oh, we did the checkbox and we ran the little fire drill and we went through the paper chase, to be able to do this, but we didn't really deal with, like, if there is a full out DR event, how do we deal with that? So I kind of wrote a book that's basically an entire DR event across the United States. Like, what would you what happens when the power doesn't come back on? What's the evil things that could have happened? And of course, it's not doom and gloom. It's just, there's a lot of statistics I put in there that are put out by the United States federal government and by the European Union and so forth. So, can you tell me about your, last DR event, and kind of like the structure that you kind of went through to be able to do this from an IT and OT perspective?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think DR is, I think it plays into the whole business continuity solution, which then plays into the risk solution, right? So we come from a risk background. Everything can be a risk, cannot be a risk. How big of a risk?
Hmm.
Is it a financial risk? Is it an information technology risk? Is it a reputation risk? Right. So I think as far as the DR conversation goes, it's looking at it and saying, is this technology, this solution critical to the operation of the business? If you check yes, then hey, I think it's time to look at the risk of losing this specific process. Whether it be people too, right? I mean that can contribute to that DR conversation because what if there's a hurricane over here and your sysadmins they can't get to your servers to reboot or your hosts or ESX hosts to get VRIs up for your offshore, right? So there's a lot of crazy catastrophes we could sit here and talk about. So I think back to it is looking at that risk, looking at the risk picture to say, is this a critical operation? Then yes, I think we need DR. And the DR, many different ways, right? You have tabletops, you have full live DR swap overs. A lot of times in the past, we've done things, what a lot of people call a DR bubble, right? Hey, we set up a
Hmm.
bubble in our DR zone, and we're going to flip a specific application over, check the failover route, check the networking piece, make sure all our security controls are present and accounted for, right? And that's a big thing I think when people do DR failover tests and our DR failovers, sometimes they don't plan and say, hey, do we have the same capacity firewalls in our DR zone? And then we flip over
Ooh.
and then we knock our firewalls offline and we lose a critical security function, right? Or maybe we don't have our EDR fully licensed for when we spin up those 2,000 other VDIs, right, to move to a DR scenario. So there's a lot of other pieces, from a security perspective you have to look at to say also, if I'm going to flip over to DR, and this is maybe we're living in DR land for 2 weeks, right? You need your critical controls, right? Maybe if we only flip over for 20 minutes, is the risk still as high that we need all those controls and we need to go in and spend the money and the resources to put those HA pairs for our firewalls or maybe our EDR appliances or DLP things like that. So I think
Mhm.
from a security perspective, that's a big piece of kind of looking at that DR analysis.
Reason why I asked that is we have these two hurricanes that are out in the ocean, you know, and acts of God, like one of those things you can't kind of prepare for, wildfires. I mean, Canada had wildfires, and like I constantly think California is burning down to the ground at least at one point or another. But acts of God are like one of those things, like and I deal a lot with New York and New Jersey. So like when Hurricane Sandy hit, it was kind of like 9/11 ish in a way because guess what? There's data centers that are over there, because they didn't want them on Manhattan Island because of what happened after September 11th. So they moved them to, like, inland to, New Jersey. And, and I was like, wow, why are you putting it next to, the coastline? But that's just me. I don't understand the economics of that, but it is what it is. But I kind of see where where you're coming from on that because from an architectural standpoint of view, it's like, wow, how good is your DR versus the infrastructure that you got now?
Right.
Is it hot swappable? Can we flip the switch and it do the same thing over there versus what it does over here? And it's a very good point that you brought up. It's like going, if you got a lot of remote workers that are not in that area, yeah, it's going to be really hard for them to get to their solution based, system. so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
And
how
we,
do you come up with threat models in your
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's true, and that's a fun one. I mean, threat modeling is always a fun exercise, and it can be a pretty lengthy exercise, right? I mean, if it's again, if it's an internet-facing application, right, is a criticality, and looking at those different attack paths, it can be a big thing. But the usually what we find success with when it comes to threat modeling is a close relationship with the developers, with the application analysts, the business system analysts, right, that understand the business processes that the application supports. Because
right.
there's a lot of times you get into an application and you go, okay, well, I secured the server, and you go, do you know how many other pieces it integrates with in the organization? No.
Yeah,
And then you start to, yeah, you start to do that data mapping or that data flow, and you go, whoa, this touches 15 different other critical systems, right? And lateral movement is a thing, has always been a thing, and will be a thing. So I think that's one of the biggest pieces is understanding the integrations and essentially your crown jewels, like everyone says.
yeah, because I see that in the energy sector. Especially in power. It's like, okay, the first thing you see during a natural disaster, what's the first thing they do? They rally everybody to get power back up and running, right? So, and it is a vertical north, south, east, west kind of thing. You got to have power to make this stuff up and run, whether it be low level power generation, backup power systems, so forth. That's one of the things I see all the time. They don't really talk about, or they just kind of ignore, within a way. So, one thing that I've got, to ask you about, and this is my own personal thing. So, since you're in healthcare, and I've been down that road before, and I've worked in healthcare, what do you think about healthcare and cloud-based solutions? How healthcare cloud is going to be. Is it going to be a thing? Because we already know the security problems with the cloud, right? Because it's
Mhm.
just your data center or your data just someplace else, right? Do you see, how do you see the future of this? What you've been doing with it? Are you doing anything with it? It's like, no, 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 we're 100% on-prem, locked down in a facility that nobody knows about, that's top secret, that's got barbed wire around it with, sharks with freaking laser beams that go around the perimeter. So I would like to get your, opinion on that, sir.
Yeah, and no, that's a good one because we're starting to see a movement towards this data exchange, right? There's a lot of health data exchanges where it's, hey, if I go to this doctor over here and I give him, my medical record, my EMR, and then all of a sudden I decide to go to a doctor 3 states away, maybe say I moved. Now I have to say, hey, can you fax over all my medical records? Can you email my medical records? Do you need FTP them? So I think you're starting to see a transition. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, FTP. Yeah.
A lot of people get nervous when they hear
Yeah.
FTP these days.
Yeah, no, I support it. I support that, right? And so that those data integrations and those exchanges are going to be big, and the way you enable that is SaaS and cloud platforms, right? You see a lot of big organizations like Epic. They provide a lot of different modules, right? Payer modules, provider modules. Where that data is going to flow in between. So I think you're going to see a larger cloud adoption. We have some cloud adoption in some certain areas with AWS, um,
Mhm.
but it's going to happen, and it's a good point, right? The cloud is so dynamic that trying to secure the cloud is, like trying to chase a slippery weasel or something, right? Like every time you get a step on it, slips away.
I agree with you because it's like cloud integration with AI. What could go wrong?
Yeah, and that's a good point, right? You see in two doctors' offices that are leveraging AI that they have a microphone or recorder, as I'll say, in their office that instead of them dictating and typing text, it is literally recording every single thing you say so that when they look back at the notes, if they didn't hear you say something or pay attention, they tend to rush. You have that component too, right? So even more data is going to start getting collected as you go into your providers' offices and things like that. And obviously, AI is not going away.
Have you seen many companies start to plan like a transition of migrate? Like obviously, the past 20 years has been the story of migrating to the cloud, but maybe a little bit of reverse, migrating some systems back to on-prem if the data is really sensitive.
Yeah, and usually, I mean, that's a good one. What I've seen is not from a data sensitivity classification perspective, but more from an ROI, right? The cloud it's scalable, it's elasticity, and you can spin up good stuff when you need it. to meet your load. But a lot of people are seeing that the cloud costs are, I wouldn't say hidden in secret, but you don't know until you get the bill and you go, whoa, I thought this was going to be 50,000 and it was 150,000. So I think more than anything, a lot of people are bringing things back on prem from a cost perspective and a cost cutting perspective. And a good example is running VDIs and virtual desktops
Right.
and
That's where I was going
yeah.
from. Is virtual desktop's great. And you've got your companies that do it perfectly. Banking industry. We used to call them thin clients. And they still use thin clients that connect to a server somewhere 3 states away. Right. But they have no control over their desktop. It's very limited for what they can and can't do. I've been screaming this about cloud since it all came out. I'm like, wait till you get that first bill. Oh, we're rushing to the cloud. We want to get rid of infrastructure. We want to get rid of the data center. We want to get rid of the server room. Like, okay, you're going to spend a lot of money. And then after 5 years, you're going to kind of plateau. Okay. And then you're going to see the real cost of cloud after 5 years. It's going to start going way down. And then it's going to spike back up because you're going to take that first dip of like, wow, we saved X amount of dollars for our cloud services because we did away with our data center. And then after 5 years, you're like, holy crap, it's 3 times as much because we're paying for all of this stuff to be up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that we don't even own. So gotcha.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Oh,
That's right. Because
yeah, medical. You're right, John. Medical data is very touchy subject.
yeah. I mean, does Microsoft own it because it's in Azure now, and it's been integrated with, their AI, does that make it Microsoft's property? Because they're housing and holding it, in a data center somewhere else that's not housed by you versus, oh, I've got a data center that's in Shremont, Louisiana or somewhere. I mean, or in Austin, Texas, or in Detroit somewhere, or in California or New York, where we own the data center, right?
Yeah.
We own the racks, we own the network switches and everything. So it's ta-da, our property versus their property. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But
kind of
yeah,
gets a little touchy.
yeah, that's always the conversation, and I hate to bring this up too, right? From a security architecture perspective in the past, doing security assessments on organizations and looking at contractual language, and in the realm of AI, unfortunately, cybersecurity contractual language is all we have as an administrative control. That one thing you can't say, well, hey, how do I know you're not using my data to train your model? Well, you unfortunately do not have that ability or that visibility, so you kind of have to say, hey, look, we're going to put in our contract, and you breach a contract, our only respite is, a financial respite. So I mean, it's a very valid point. It's very difficult to know where that data lives and who owns it at some point.
So as an architect, how do you manage visibility these days? Because it can get really, we've mentioned all the complexities of visibility. There's that, there's also like shadow IT. Like, have you worked in a lot of orgs that have a lot of shadow IT that people are unaware of?
Yeah, no, it's still a thing. Shadow IT is difficult, and I think from an architecture perspective, we kind of have to look at it holistically, right? We have to bring together a couple different pieces of the security department, whether it be SOC with, hey, we see an alert on a system we've never seen before. It's not in a host list. Maybe we pull in, our vulnerability management team is, doing their compliance and their vulnerability scan, and hey, look, we detected 10 assets we've never seen before in an IP range that is not authorized. So I think it's pulling a lot of these pieces together and trying to build a holistic picture. But that is a challenge we have. It is a challenge that's been in the industry forever and will continue to be. I hate to say it, is asset inventory. You cannot protect what you don't know exists out there, right? So having at least a confidence level to say, hey, look, I'm 95% confident that these assets I see in my CMDB or in my record, maybe an Active Directory, I'm 95% confident this is all our records, right? And then you essentially have to come to a threshold and understanding, say, we're going to go from here.
Right. And then and how much of that data is true versus not true,
Yeah.
So for people that are getting into this industry, that want to get into cybersecurity architecture in the job field, right? What do you recommend for them to do to start, as I say, the junior level to a senior level? Like, everybody's got their own little journey. Everybody went through, their own way of doing this. legally or illegally. I'm not going to say which one, but as I've always said, nobody gets into this industry without a little bit of villainy in their past. So that's how I've always taken it. So tell us a little bit, about for people that are graduating right now. We are having a high graduation rate finally of people that are getting into the cybersecurity field that want to look, into architecture. They want to get into these things. So, kind of give them, a little bit of what I call career advice, to kind of get them into like going, okay, this is what you're going to have to do. This is what you're going to need to do. These certifications you might want to be looking into, not only, compared to your degree.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And, the once or twice I check LinkedIn every week, that is probably in about 80% of the posts out there, right? Is the
Yeah.
cybersecurity market is bad and people are trying to break into the industry. My journey was unique, right? So I got to start when cybersecurity was hot and there were a lot of openings.
Yeah.
My best advice has always been the foundational principles, right? You can't make a jump from, hey, I just like computers and all of a sudden I want to be a pen tester, right? I mean, you can't be an effective pen tester unless you understand how a host works, how the operating system works, the different pieces. So for me, what I've found is sometimes you may have to start small. Maybe you have to start as a help desk technician, right? Maybe that's where you start learning the components. Then you say, hey, I'm going to become maybe an IT support engineer, something I did. Maybe do system administration and network administration. And maybe at that point you say, hey, I like where cybersecurity is going. And then you can understand the principles and the foundations of how the solutions and the technology works. Then you can create a more holistic security picture and a security posture when you start looking at that stuff. But
unfortunately, the general trend seems to be that I'm sure a lot of people are very happy about the idea of learning on the job and moving from a junior position to a senior position. But the problem doesn't seem to be the people working in these positions. The problem seems to be that companies aren't hiring junior people. And they expect, they don't want to do any on the job training. They don't want to pay for employee training. They expect that the employee takes on all the burden of everything, or sometimes they just don't take on junior people at all. And eventually the whole organization might collapse because there should be a flow, right, of senior people mentoring junior people.
Absolutely.
And it seems to be cut off on the end of accepting new juniors to come in.
Yeah, no, 100% agree, and that's having that pipeline of talent, as they like to call it in the HR world, is very important. I've worked for a couple organizations in the past that have integrated and connected with local universities and colleges and say, hey, look, when you get cybersecurity graduates, let's bring them in. Let's bring them in as an intern, and let's give them some real world experience. Yeah, and the job market, I hate to say it, tipping the toes in the water, it's broken, right? Going through ATS, going through the keywords, it's horrible. And
Yeah, and I mean, it's like, the certifications, I'm looking at the certifications right now that people are saying for role-based, things, right? So if you want to be for an example, an OT systems administrator, you need to have your network plus, your security plus, your security OT plus, and then your, GI, CISP. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money. That's a
yeah,
lot of money, and I mean, I'm an administrator, that's what I do. I administer to the network, right?
yeah,
I'm not like you. I'm not an architect. Don't do the design work and whatnot. Normally, my job's to come in and fix that. So as an administrator, it's like, oh, they missed this. We don't. I don't try to play the blame game or whatnot. But it's like when we interview people, because I've found out that companies will spend $6 million before they, on a tool before they hire 6 people.
right,
It's just weird. I
yeah,
don't understand. It's like, wow, it's cheaper for you to hire the people and give them benefits and do all of that kind of stuff than it is to spend $6 million on this package that you're locked into for 5 to 7 years. I
right,
don't know what it is. It's
yeah.
just something. I don't know why they don't understand it from that standpoint of view. It's like, wow, I'm saving you money by doing this, right?
Yeah. And I think the difficulty is how do you understand and see someone's potential from a piece of paper, right? And your
Yeah.
resume, because I mean, if you look at some of the statistics, they tell you an HR recruiter spends what, like 31 seconds reviewing your resume, right? So you better show some value in your first 5 bullet points for them to push it through. So, I mean, my best advice for the juniors is at this time, it's networking, right? Find your local ISACA chapters, your ISC squared,
B
get
sides.
yeah, B-sides, get integrated with those things, meet people, talk to them, pick their brains, and say, "Hey, tell me about real world scenarios." And obviously, you'll hear the age old advice, "Hey, do your lab networks and do all your fun lab devices in your homes and things like this," which is very valuable hands on. And I think the difficulty not only for juniors but anyone in the job market is how do you show your value on your resume. I learned a good tip a long time ago from someone who used to be a recruiter, and he said, "Hey, put it in numbers," right? So, for example, if you were, a cloud system engineer and you increase your AWS compliance score from 35% to 70%, put that in your resume. Show the numbers
Yeah.
because numbers catch the eye and it shows your value, and list the big projects that you participated in because that's a good conveyor of your experience.
I have found out that, especially with CIOs and CTOs, your chief information security officer and your chief technology officer, it's like they all report to the CFO, chief financial officer, because you know what? If they don't get the money, they don't get the program. They don't get the money, they don't get the hardware, right? So, I show them like, hey, I saved you X amount of dollars, as well as that. It's like, if you went to your boss and go, hey, I just saved you $1.5 million and you didn't have to switch to Geico. Ha ha, probably get a promotion, or at least a data boy, kind of thumbs up. I see that a lot, especially for people that are getting into this, because unfortunately with, my role, with the people that we interview, you got to have 3 to 5 years experience of keyboard time, physically touching the keyboard and clicking on stuff before we'll interview you. Right. And the certifications sometimes are verbiage and, alphabet soup. And, it's kind of like, okay, as long as you show me, especially on my team, if you're trainable and you don't act like you know it all, and you want to learn, and you stay hungry, and you're like going, hey, why did they do it this way? Because if I was an attacker, I would have done it this way, right? So scenarios, right? So, I think the best one, because I deal with, vendors as well. And that's going to be this is building into my next question on how you deal with vendors. Is that a vendor tried to sell me something that, they said it has invisible processes in the background. And I'm like, what are invisible processes? And, the question I came back, I was, oh, so it uses invisible processes. So if it breaks, how do I fix it? Right. Because I click on a lot of keys, this thing keeps going constantly, when I'm double clicking on stuff. And they're like, well, it's math. And I'm like, I love math. Let's talk about math, and they basically dug themselves into a deep hole. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that a lot with people that I interview, and I know you see that a lot with sometimes your students and stuff. They think they know what they're talking about because they've read it from an article or a book, but they really don't know what they're doing because they've never had to do it before, right?
Yeah.
So, kind of get an idea of like the skill set that that you look for people that you're going to bring onto your team versus, educations and certifications versus practicality. Because like, I can have somebody that's a line worker that's run, that knows all, everything about, cabling, cable managements and how to set up PLCs and everything because they've done it, right? Like they know how to physically wire down, a comm cabinet from ABB. Now that I put them in a virtual terminal, in a session, like, hi there, this is the architecture stuff that goes with this job. Tell me what you know about it. And if they go, I've never really seen that before, but I want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we were talking last week about simulator games, and you were talking about how there are red team engagement simulator games now, and maybe success in playing those games should count as a CPE.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, you see the prevalence of things, like Hack the Box, right? And you get to post your certs online and things like that. Yeah, I would say, to make it real quick, because I know we're getting close, but like you said, that desire to learn, because cybersecurity is extremely dynamic, right? So for me, an open mind, the ability to say, hey, look, I was wrong, show me the right way. And like you said, an open mind and that potential, it's easy to learn if you're willing to learn.
Okay. Now, are there any kind of like charities that you support by any chance?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question. One of the ones I've been working with since I was previously at Blue Cross Louisiana, and it's not a specific charity, but it's called Taproot Plus, and it's essentially pro bono IT work for the community, right? So if there's charities within the community that say, hey, look, we need help, maybe looking at our CRM software, maybe we need help redesigning our website, and we reach out to this specific population or demographic that's in the community, you can provide volunteer pro bono service to them and do the actual work for them. And that's worked for them before. We've done kind of some company-related organizations, both companies I work for, NC and Louisiana. We partner with Taproot and do things like that, but it's a great opportunity for volunteer work and to help the community.
Well, that's really cool. I do two charities. One is the EFF because I'm all about free speech. I'm a firm believer you should be able to say whatever the hell you want to say whenever the hell you want to say it. And the other one is the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. So I volunteer my time, for free speech for comic books.
Hey, well, I mean, yeah, that's the beauty. There's a lot of things out there that you can support, that aligns with, what you believe in. And Taproot does a good job of that, right? And, you got a great platform. You can get in and say, hey, look, I want to look at IT stuff, marketing things, HR things, and here's my, my belief structure, and here's what I would like to see aligned with. And there's a lot of opportunities to check out.
Yeah, Kim is a member of some of these groups where they like actually go out and touch grass.
Yeah, well, social groups. That social group is a little different from a charity, right? I guess charities that I support are mainly like Doctors Without Borders.
That's a good one.
That's a very good one.
Which has been very busy organization lately. Their resources, they've been burning through their resources pretty quick. So.
Yeah, and I've never heard of Taproot. I mean, that sounds like it's a really cool thing. It's like going, hey, for free, you get these professionals to come in and look at your stuff. We're not here to beat it up. We're just kind of telling you, here's some of the things that you're going to fall into with pitfalls and whatnot. So, unfortunately, the state and the community I live in is very rural, and there's no user groups, but there is, a cybersecurity community that's built around the community college, and they bring me in every quarter, and I'm like, hi there, I'm the last guy you ever want to see show up at your door because, the really pro bono work that I do is with law enforcement. So I work a lot with law enforcement for like considered to be high crimes, sex crimes cases, child pornography cases, murder for hire. I've worked on a couple of those. So, as I tell, my law enforcement stuff I do is completely different versus my, free speech stuff that I deal with. So I think that's really cool that y'all do that, for the community of people that are really trying to break into the industry.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you have experience, and it's a good place to kind of apply your trade, right? But they have a lot of variety of stuff, and it is really cool. It's very rewarding to see, kind of address their challenges in a different way, right? Maybe, like you said, touching grass, going out and painting a wall, or it could be, redesign their website, right? And it helps the outreach.
This has been really great. Thank you so much, Andrew. I've been learning a lot because I don't get to speak to architects as much as people in other professions. So this has been you've taught me a lot today.
Well, thank you, you guys. It's an honor being here, and thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you so very much again today, sir, and thank everyone for joining the Criticality, podcast that we do here every single Wednesday that we possibly can. Thank you, sir, for running the gauntlet today, answering our questions about not only critical infrastructure, about what it is that you do and do in the industry. And thank you all so very much to all of our wonderful sponsors. Secure Nation does a great job, of providing for us. So we love you guys. Y'all are the best. We love you so much, our very sponsors, but I'm still waiting for that Starbucks money. Come on.
You need to have the logo on your thermos first. That would help.
Yeah, that would be cool. I could do that. I don't see a problem with that.
All right. We're all corporate whores here. Thank you
very
much.
We are.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so very much. Have a great day today.
Okay.